November 10th, 2020. Kansas City, Missouri. A detective arrives at the home of Fawn Cox's parents. They've been waiting, in one form or another, for 31 years. He tells them only this. After 31 years, investigators finally have an answer. No name, no explanation. Only the certainty that the case they had almost stopped expecting to hear about is finally over. July 1989. Kansas City doesn't cool off after sunset. Heat settles over the neighborhood and stays there. Window air conditioners run in nearly every room, filling the house with the steady mechanical hum of another Missouri summer night. Fawn Cox is 16. She works evenings at Worlds of Fun, the amusement park a few miles from home. On July 26th, her shift ends around 11 o'clock. She comes home, heads upstairs, and sets out for another workday the next morning. Normally, she shares her bedroom with her younger sisters. That night, the heat changes the routine. Her sisters sleep downstairs where it's cooler. Fawn stays upstairs, alone. Downstairs, the family dog won't settle. She's pregnant, pacing through the house, restless enough to be noticed. Everyone assumes that's the reason. The air conditioners keep running. An alarm clock sits beside Fawn's bed, already set for morning. Outside, the second-floor bedroom window looks no different from any other on the block. Nobody inside the house has any reason to think about it. By morning, that alarm will begin to ring. It will keep ringing long enough that someone finally walks upstairs to find out why Fawn hasn't turned it off. For now, the house is exactly what it has always been. Hot, noisy, asleep. Outside, someone is already standing beneath that window. Northeast High School is out for the summer, but Fawn Cox's schedule hardly changes. Most evenings, she's headed to work. Worlds of Fun sits only a few miles from home, the kind of place where teenagers spend their summers earning a paycheck. By closing time, the midway begins to empty. One ride after another shuts down until only a handful of lights remain. Fawn usually works those late shifts. Most nights, she comes home carrying the smell of fryer oil, sunscreen, and a Missouri summer that never seems to cool off. Home runs on routine, shared bedrooms, shared chores, the familiar rhythm of a family that knows where everyone is supposed to be. Fawn usually shares the upstairs bedroom with her younger sisters. Sundays are for church, weeknights are for work. At 16, the routine is ordinary enough that nobody thinks much about it. The Northeast neighborhood is the kind of place where people know each other's children. Monty Clark knows the Cox family long before the case becomes part of his life. He drives a bus for both Northeast High School and Fawn's church. Years later, he still remembers passing the house on East 9th Street. Not because anything unusual happened there then, but because it was another family along a route he knew by heart. The last week of July feels no different from the ones before it. Another shift, another drive home, another alarm is set before bed because tomorrow starts early. She expects another ordinary morning. She never gets one. The house at 4640 East 9th Street doesn't stand out. It's a two-story frame home, set close to the street, much like the others around it. Fawn's bedroom is upstairs, toward the back of the house. Directly beneath her window is the roof over the back porch. From there, the window is within easy reach. To the Cox family, it isn't a security concern. It's simply part of the house. A roof, a gutter, a window that's always been there. Inside, the July heat changes how everyone sleeps. Window air conditioners run from room to room, filling the house with a steady mechanical hum. The sound becomes part of the night, constant enough that nobody notices it anymore. Fawn's parents are asleep. Her younger sisters are downstairs where it's cooler. Fawn is alone in the upstairs bedroom she usually shares. From the street, nothing tells you which room belongs to her. Nothing tells you that one window opens above the porch roof. Nothing tells you that a person could reach it without ever using the front door. Someone found it anyway, not by accident, not in daylight, in the dark. Whoever climbed onto that porch roof already knew exactly where they were going. Fawn's shift at Worlds of Fun ends around 11 that night. She drives home. She's scheduled to work again the next day, so she doesn't stay up. Inside, the house has settled into its familiar rhythm. Her parents are asleep. Her younger sisters are downstairs where the air is cooler. Fawn heads upstairs alone. On most nights, the room is shared. Tonight, it isn't. The air conditioners keep running. They'll run until morning. What happened next cannot be reconstructed minute by minute. Investigators were never able to determine exactly when someone climbed onto the porch roof, how long they waited, or the precise moment the bedroom window was forced open. The evidence only narrows the timeline. Sometime after midnight, before sunrise, what detectives do know is how the intruder entered. The second-floor window had been forced from the outside. The glass was broken. The latch showed signs of being pried open. The entry point wasn't a theory. It was documented at the scene. What happened inside the bedroom is known only through the evidence investigators recovered the following morning. Fawn was sexually assaulted. She was strangled. Beyond those findings, the case file offers no certainty. It doesn't reveal whether she woke up. It doesn't reveal how long the attack lasted. It doesn't reveal whether anyone inside the house heard anything at all. By sunrise, whoever entered that room was gone. No witness saw them leave. No one inside the house realized they had ever been there. The alarm clock beside Fawn's bed was still set for work. It went off exactly when it was supposed to. It kept ringing, long enough that it no longer sounded ordinary. Her mother and one of her sisters walked upstairs to turn it off. Instead, they found Fawn. Crime scene investigators arrive at 4640 East 9th Street on the morning of July 27th. The bedroom is no longer a bedroom. By the time they begin their work, it has become evidence. Nothing is touched before it's photographed. Nothing is moved before it's documented. The window draws their attention first. The glass is broken inward. The latch bears fresh tool marks. Someone forced it open from the outside before climbing through. That much is immediately clear. Investigators photograph the shattered glass, the window frame, the bed, every angle of the room. They're preserving a scene they know they'll never see exactly this way again. Then they begin collecting what the intruder left behind. Biological evidence is recovered from the bedding and from Fawn herself. In 1989, detectives knew it's important, but they don't yet know how. The evidence is carefully collected, sealed, labeled, and placed into storage, where it will remain for decades. The laboratory performs the most advanced testing available at the time, ABO blood typing. The result narrows the donor to a type O secretor. It excludes some people. It identifies no one. Fingerprint technicians examine the window and the broken glass. Partial prints are recovered. None contain enough detail to identify the person who left them. By the end of the first day, detectives understand far more about the crime than they do about the person who committed it. They know how someone entered the house. They know what happened inside the bedroom. They've preserved biological evidence they believe will matter. What they don't have is a name. For now, every piece of evidence points to someone. None of it points to who. Before the first week is over, detectives receive their first real lead. A juvenile from the neighborhood tells investigators they know who killed Fawn Cox. Detectives listen carefully. Then they go back and hear the story again. The account stays the same. Two local teenagers are identified. Both are associated with a neighborhood group known as the 9th Street Dogs. Detectives move quickly. The teenagers are located, questioned, and arrested. Formal murder charges follow. One of them remains in custody, not for days, for 8 months. For the investigators, this is the first time the case feels as though it's moving toward an answer. They have suspects. They have a witness willing to testify. They have a prosecution beginning to take shape. Now they wait for the physical evidence to support it. The laboratory completes the blood typing. In 1989, it's the best science available. The results arrive. They don't confirm the suspects. They don't eliminate them either. The evidence leaves detectives exactly where it found them. The case still depends on the witness. For months, that seems enough. Then everything changes. The witness withdraws the statement. Under oath, they admit the account wasn't true. The investigation shifts almost overnight. Detectives lose the testimony that held the case together. Prosecutors review what remains. Without the witness, there isn't enough evidence to move forward. The charges are dismissed. The teenager who spent 8 months in jail walks free. The investigation doesn't simply lose its strongest lead. It loses the certainty detectives believed they had finally found. Once again, the case returns to the same unanswered question waiting inside that house on East 9th Street. If those two teenagers weren't responsible, who was? The arrests are over, the charges are gone, the questions remain. As the years pass, Fawn's family refuses to let the case disappear. A billboard goes up along a Kansas City highway. Fawn's photograph fills the sign. Beneath it, a reward and a phone number for anyone who knows something. The family pays for it themselves. Every few years, another reporter calls. John and Beverly Cox agree to another interview, another photograph, another request for information. The questions never change. Neither do their answers. Inside the Kansas City Police Department, the evidence waits. The biological samples collected in 1989 remain sealed and preserved, even as the detectives who first worked the case retire and new investigators inherit the files. In the early 2000s, advances in DNA testing offer a new opportunity. A genetic profile is developed from the biological evidence and entered into the National DNA Database. Detectives wait. No match. The person who left that evidence has never entered the system. The investigation stalls again. The file returns to the shelf. Fawn's parents keep asking whether new technology might succeed where everything else has failed. If necessary, they're willing to help pay for it themselves. Years pass. Monty Clark never completely lets the case go either. On his own time, he searches through old newspaper clippings, photographs, and neighborhood memories, hoping one overlooked detail might still matter. No one asks him to. He keeps looking anyway. In 2018, detectives revisit the strongest suspects from the original investigation. Both men agree to provide new DNA samples. The results are definitive. Neither man is responsible for Fawn's murder. One chapter finally closes. The investigation is still no closer to opening the next one. By 2020, the evidence hasn't changed. The science has. That summer, Kansas City was selected for Operation Legend, a federal initiative providing additional resources to investigate violent crime. For the cold case unit, it opens a door that had remained closed for years. Captain Ben Caldwell knows exactly which files deserve another look. Fawn Cox's is one of them. The biological evidence collected in 1989 is still intact. It has survived more than 3 decades. What held the investigation back was never the evidence. It was the cost of doing something no one could afford when the case first went cold. With new funding available, detectives submit the evidence for investigative genetic genealogy. Then they wait. The process doesn't begin with a suspect. It begins with people who have never heard of Fawn Cox. Distant DNA matches, public records, birth certificates, marriage records, one family connection leading to another. Investigators and genealogists slowly work backward through generations before working forward again, narrowing a family tree one branch at a time. Weeks later, the results arrived. Not a name, a family. Detectives study the tree. One branch begins to separate itself from the others. The possibilities become fewer. The direction becomes clearer. For the first time since the original investigation collapsed, detectives aren't chasing another theory. They're following evidence. The case finally has somewhere new to go. The branch detectives are following grows smaller with every record they examine. Genealogists move through birth certificates, marriage records, census records, and family histories, crossing off one possibility after another. Some people are too old. Others never lived near Kansas City. Some have no connection to Fawn's life at all. The list keeps shrinking. Eventually, only one name remains. Detectives begin pulling together everything they can about him. In the summer of 1989, he would have been about 21 years old enough to have known Fawn, old enough to have been part of the same extended family. But a family tree isn't evidence. It points investigators in a direction. It doesn't prove a case. Before they can close a murder investigation that's lasted more than 3 decades, detectives need a direct DNA comparison. That's when they discover another obstacle. The man they've identified died years earlier. Ordinarily, that would end the investigation. Instead, it opens one final opportunity. When he died in 2006, the circumstances surrounding his death required the medical examiner to collect and preserve a blood sample. It had nothing to do with Fawn Cox. No one imagined the 2 cases would ever intersect. For years, the sample remained exactly where it had been stored. Detectives request it. The laboratory compares the blood sample collected in 2006 with the biological evidence recovered from Fawn's bedroom in 1989. This time, there is no uncertainty. The profiles match. After 31 years, the evidence finally identifies the person investigators had been searching for, Donald Cox Jr. Donald Cox Jr. wasn't a stranger. He was Fawn's cousin, not a distant relative whose name had long disappeared from the family tree. Someone who had been inside that house before. Someone who didn't need to search for the right window. He already knew where it was. For more than 3 decades, detectives treated the upstairs window as a question. How did someone find it in the dark? How did they know which bedroom belonged to Fawn? The DNA changed the question. It wasn't about finding the room. It was about already knowing it. The porch roof was never the mystery. Neither was the window. The mystery was the person who climbed through it. Other details begin to look different too. The family dog had been restless throughout the night. At the time, everyone assumed it was because she was pregnant. Investigators never treated it as evidence. Even now, it remains only a detail from that night. But the identity of the killer changes the way the house itself is understood. Someone familiar with the family, someone familiar with the layout, someone who didn't have to guess where anything was. The failed investigation in 1989 also takes on a different meaning. Detectives followed the strongest evidence they had, a witness. 2 suspects, the best forensic testing available at the time. Nothing pointed toward Donald Cox Jr. Nothing identified him. Without modern DNA technology, there was no reason for investigators to look in his direction. When Captain Ben Caldwell later spoke with Fawn's parents, they shared something they had never been able to prove. Over the years, both had quietly wondered whether their nephew might somehow have been involved. It wasn't evidence. It wasn't something they could act on. Only a suspicion that had lived with them for decades. Now, the DNA has answered it. Donald Cox Jr. died in 2006. Whatever explanation he could have offered for that night died with him. November 10, 2020, detectives returned to the Cox family with the answer they had waited 31 years to hear. The DNA identified the man responsible, Donald Cox Jr. Captain Ben Caldwell would later describe the family's reaction. It wasn't disbelief. Both of Fawn's parents told him they had quietly wondered over the years whether their nephew might somehow have been involved, not because they had proof, not because they could explain why, only because the thought had never completely left them. Now they finally knew. The following day, the Kansas City Police Department announces the case has been solved. Standing before reporters, Captain Caldwell speaks about the investigation that stayed with detectives long after other cases had come and gone. An innocent 16-year-old girl had been murdered in her own home. For many of the investigators, the case was never simply another file on a shelf. Fawn's sister, Felisa, also speaks publicly. She doesn't describe the news as the ending her family hoped for. She calls it closure, not because the loss disappeared, not because justice arrived in the way anyone wanted, because, after 31 years, the questions had finally stopped. There would never be a trial. No jury would hear the evidence. No sentence would ever be handed down. Monty Clark, who spent years searching through old newspaper clippings and neighborhood memories on his own time, believed the family finally had an answer. Whether that answer felt like justice was something only they could decide. The investigation was over. The waiting was over. The loss remained. 31 years after Fawn Cox was killed, The house at 4640 East 9th Street is gone. The second-floor bedroom is gone. The porch roof investigators measured is gone. The window that shaped an investigation for more than 3 decades is gone. Today, people drive past the corner of East 9th Street and Van Brunt without knowing what once stood there. Monty Clark does. After all these years, he still knows exactly where that upstairs window used to be. Some places never completely leave the people who remember them. Inside the Kansas City Police Department, something else remained. The biological evidence collected on the morning of July 27, 1989, stayed exactly where investigators left it. Sealed, labeled, preserved. Detectives retired. Technology changed. 31 years passed. The evidence waited. Long before anyone knew how to identify the person who left it behind, someone made sure it would still be there when the science finally caught up. That quiet decision made everything that followed possible. The investigation reached its answer. Fawn's family finally learned who had taken their daughter. There was no trial. There was no sentence, only the truth, arriving 31 years later than anyone had hoped. Fawn Marie Cox is buried at Mount Washington Cemetery in Independence, Missouri. Her headstone carries a name, 2 dates. Everything that should have happened between them exists only in the memories of the people who loved her. After everything you've heard, what surprised you the most about this case? The failed investigation, the 31-year wait, or the fact that the killer was part of the family all along? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this documentary, leave a like, share it with someone who enjoys well-researched true crime, and subscribe for more investigations like this. If you're ready for another case, click the video on your screen. I'll see you there.